Our position preview shows on the offense will begin, but first we've got to do the position battles as we rank them orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason doing 5 now, not 4 like we done on defense, but 5, starting with tight end. There's a battle, but is it much of a battle if one of the other guys can't show up and Lucas Kroll just takes the damn job?
Yeah, that's the question. Adam Troutman, his role is pretty secure. I mean, I'm assuming he's healthy. Adam Troutman, you can put in Sharpie on this roster, but it's Greg Dulcich and Lucas Kroll, and we didn't see Greg Dulcich at all during OTAs and minicamp. Sean Payton had said Greg Dulcich's injury was not going to keep him out until training camp. Turned out that it did. That's where you have the narrator's voice, right?
Yes, Morgan Freeman. In fact, it would be a problem.
Yeah. So Lucas Kroll took advantage of that in a big way during OTAs and minicamp, catching the attention of onlookers, catching the attention of Sean Payton, consistently making plays from all 3 quarterbacks, by the way, it must be said. So Greg Dulcich goes into training camp. There's still hope for him, but remember, the Broncos didn't draft a tight end. They signed Thomas Yasmin out of Utah as an undrafted rookie, but he's in the Air National Player Pathway program. So basically, he's got a practice squad spot no matter what.
Sure.
And as a former rugby player from Australia, Yasmin's probably at least a year away from really being able to potentially get on the field realistically in the NFL. So they didn't make moves at tight end, which tells you if Greg Dulcich isn't ready, this team trusts Lucas Kroll in a big way.
Yeah, trust him to make that next step. We're trusting Sean Payton when we're ranking position battles on the offense, and we get to center at number 4. He told us, and I'll play the clip here, but he told us don't play into the threat because it looks like Luke Wattenberg is the guy, but Alex Forsyth is in the rotation. Sam Mustipher is there as that veteran insurance, the Levi Wallace of the center group. But Payton told us straight up, don't play much or read much into the rotation of this.
I want to see the centers with the different guards. I want to see the quarterbacks with the different offensive lines. And look, there's a lot ahead of us where you begin to then, and so that's why, my message to the coaches is like, rotate them in there. I'm not going to look at a practice snap and get upset because Billy's in with this group. I'm not. And so this is the time of the season where you can do that, and not worry about, the quarterback's getting hit because you have a younger offensive lineman maybe at one position, or so I want to see the rotations and they don't have to follow a set pattern. And it's important to tell the players that too.
That was what we saw during OTAs. You'll probably get more of a set pattern as you get into training camp, but they were mixing and matching. They were trying to figure things out. And also, so no matter who the center is, you're ready to go. Luke Wattenberg, year 3 with the Broncos, year 2 in this scheme. He's put on some weight. He's at the heaviest weight of his career. Offensive line coach Zach Strief told me he hasn't lost his agility, hasn't lost his quickness. What he likes about Wattenberg now is that he's got a little more bulk on him, a little more power, but he has that length. He's using that length really well, and of course, things are slowing down for him mentally. Right. And so there was a palpable excitement in Zach Strief's voice talking about the progress of Luke Wattenberg. Like you said, Sam Mustipher is kind of he's there just in case Forsyth and Wattenberg don't develop. The Broncos like Alex Forsyth, up here. I think they'd like to see him when the pads go on to really kind of get a gauge on it. But right now, based on what I saw, I do expect we'll see one of the 2 young guys at center in week 1.
Yes, we could do an entire series on our next position battle on offense, and that's running back. The only guy in Penn is Jaleel McLaughlin. That's it. If Javonte got cut, I'm not predicting it. Wouldn't be surprised. Everyone assumed when Audric Estime was drafted that Samaje Perine would be out the door. That doesn't seem to be the case, as he's more than fine in the mini camp and OTAs. And of course, Blake Watson, how does he fit in this mix? Estime, when he comes back in training camp, it's not a big deal. A little cleanup knee thing, fine. He's a power player that's exciting. You have a collection of talented running backs with all different skill sets.
Talent to spare. That's the thing. And, you watch Samaje Perine out there in OTAs and minicamp. Man, he's got the burst of a rookie. It was pretty shocking to watch the way he was moving. I thought he looked a lot faster than he did last year. Certainly Javonte Williams looks better than he did last year, but he doesn't quite look all the way back just yet. And day after day, when we're talking about explosive runs or explosive plays just from running backs, that includes what they're doing coming out of the backfield, most days that you and I watched practice, we were talking about Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine, Blake Watson.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's good
and
collection.
Not Javonte Williams.
So, no.
And Audric Estime, of course, had the knee cleanup. He's going to be back for training camp. This is a tough room to gauge, man. And again, Jaleel McLaughlin may not be number one on the depth chart, but he has a pretty specific niche that he's carved out. And if he can flourish in pass pro, if he can take a lot of what he did on the practice field, he looks a little bit bigger. He's added some weight. He's worked on his technique. If he can be at least an okay player in pass pro, his role expands. But even if that doesn't come, there's still a role for him as that small change of pace, electric back out of the backfield, who I think if he still ends up being a 10 snap a game guy, I think he's going to be better than he was last year, because if it's Bo Nix specifically, he'll have a quarterback that's probably going to do a better job getting the ball to him in stride than Russell Wilson did last year.
A rookie quarterback's best friend can be a strong ground game, and they have options. We just don't know who it's going to be.
Sean Payton said running game and defense. If you're looking for the two things that'll support a rookie quarterback in his development, I asked him about that at the draft. Run game and defense. And we saw defense in particular. They focused on upgrading the run defense specifically. It's very old school, but the thing is, if you can stop the run and limit the possibilities, you can drop back into coverage and you can make some takeaways happen. And if you can run the ball on offense, you can control the pace and limit the exposure of your defense. And when the Broncos committed to the run last October, they had longer drives. They chewed up more clock. They limited the exposure of the defense. And that's when they started to win.
Football's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Honestly, you mentioned old school approach. Yeah, play special teams, run the ball, play great defense. Like, if you have an elite quarterback, that's great. If you don't, play old school. And they're ready to do that. Now, who's a wide receiver that could come through as the best friend for either Jarrett Stidham or Bo Nix, as we rank these? Number two on our list is the wide receiver position. Here's Sean Payton talking about this talented group.
I like that group, and if you study it closely, it's big. I mean, across the board, and then it's got speed. So, man, there's going to be heavy competition there, heavy competition at running back, the same in the back end with the secondary. And I think, there's that old saying, iron sharpens iron, and I feel like that's going to happen.
Quality all through the wide receiver room. They didn't have Courtland Sutton for OTAs, and then he was there at minicamp, and he did individual reps, and then he went to work on a side field coming off the ankle injury. But in terms of getting production from the wide receiver position during minicamp and OTAs, they didn't miss Courtland Sutton. Not with Marvin Mims Jr. catching everything and having the biggest plays on multiple practices that we saw. Not with Josh Reynolds catching everything. The practices we watched, no drops for Josh Reynolds, big thing. not with guys like Brandon Johnson and Jalen Virgil making plays as you move down the depth chart, not with Devon Vele and Troy Franklin. And Franklin in particular really bursting out as OTAs and minicamp went on. He seemed to get better every practice that we saw. Because of that, you're going to have some names that don't make it. Tim Patrick, I mean, he's coming back from his injury. His best days were at the end. Now, straight line speed, I've talked about this. There's a little bit of a hitch in long straight line runs as he comes off of the torn ACL and the torn Achilles, but he's cutting sharply on that knee, on that Achilles. He's running good routes. He's catching everything. Maybe his future doesn't include a lot of explosive plays, but doesn't include 10 yards on a slant, 8 yards on a cross. That's the case. Move the chains. I mean, maybe he's your Larry Fitzgerald, and I'm talking about Fitz at the end of his career in the Arizona offense when he didn't have the dynamic speed, but he was still reliable and still could catch everything. Maybe that's Tim Patrick's role, not to get plays downfield, but to just keep the line moving.
Yeah, and then it brings me to what do you do with Courtland Sutton? Because Mims could be the number one.
Mm-hmm.
He could be. Reynolds, fantastic number 2.
Yeah.
Devon Vele. Troy Franklin could be your number 3 right now. Hell, he could be your number 2 right now, my opinion. Leads me back to what do you do with Court?
And you got little Jordan Humphrey, who had that big play in Week 17 last year.
And the special teams ace.
Huge special teamer. Look.
He's not going anywhere.
The thing about wide receiver, and if not for the obvious position at number 1, wide receiver will be the number 1 competition in a lot of camps that we've covered.
Yes.
Based on what's here. And there are going to be names that people recognize. I mean, Brandon Johnson, he caught that Hail Mary. Jalen Virgil, the long touchdown in Tennessee back in 2022. Little Jordan Humphrey, the touchdown from Jarrett Stidham back at the end of the 2023 season. There are guys that have made plays. There are people that fans know. Not all of them are going to make the roster. It's the opposite problem of last year. There weren't enough good receivers to keep everyone around. Now you've got players who are productive or they're on the rise, and there's not going to be room for all of them.
Yep. And you mentioned number 1
with a bullet.
Yes.
Obvious.
Yeah, an obvious.
Is it tackle?
Right, exactly. What could it be? What could it be?
Oh my gosh.
Sean Payton talked about the quarterback competition.
It went how I wanted it to go, and again, I've said this not only at that position, but man, the inside backer position, the corner position, the safety position. We'll have a plan when we start camp, and then then we begin to make some decisions relative to reps, all that. But right now, it kind of went like we expected. A lot of good things and a lot of good stuff to coach off of, things to correct.
There you go.
Things to correct, a lot to go off of. Now, the question is it a 3-quarterback rotation when you get to training camp? Because at the mandatory minicamp, they canceled practice number 3. So there were 2 practices. One day belonged to Jarrett Stidham and one day belonged to Bo Nix with the ones, which, oh, by the way, the rotation in OTAs was Stidham, Wilson, Nix. Minicamp, it was Stidham, Wilson. Or Stidham, Nix, pardon me. Stidham, Nix.
It's a 2-horse race.
Yeah.
It is.
What we've seen, there's a gap from those 2 to Zach Wilson in terms of the performance that we've seen. Again, we don't have the complete picture. We didn't see every day of OTAs. We saw 1 practice a week for 3 weeks and then 2 mini camp practices. Jarrett Stidham was steady. I think he looked the best. Seemed like most days he had the best throw. Bo Nix, though, for a rookie, did an awful lot of good things. Advanced in terms of his poise, his ability to make checks and calls of the line, his huddle presence, his knowledge of the offense, and his accuracy well ahead of the other first, second round type quarterbacks that I've seen come through the Broncos over the last 20 years.
It's going to be a fun one, and
Yep.
all eyes are going to be on those quarterbacks.
Indeed.
Just to see. You're going to love what you see from Bo Nix, but you know what? You can love what you see from Jarrett Stidham as well.
Mm-hmm.
This one's going to be a tough. It's not as simple as Nix is the clear-cut guy. I want him to start week 1, but I also just want 12 games. So if that's not week 1, it's not week 1.
And Sean Payton talked about the locker room and what impact does that have on it? It's real simple. If Jarrett Stidham is the best quarterback and everyone in the locker room sees that, you have to play the best. You have to play the best one. They're going to see right through you if you don't. So if Jarrett Stidham is clearly the number 1 quarterback based on the work in training camp and the preseason, and then Sean Payton gets up there and says, we're starting Bo Nix, there'll be some faith lost in the locker room. If they're close, I think there'll be an understanding it's going to be Bo Nix.
Sure.
But if Stidham is a car length ahead of Bo Nix, in other words, it's obvious. It's obvious to the naked eye. Then it'll be hard for him to sell starting Bo Nix to the locker room, because you want to tell players it's a meritocracy. Best player wins. Best player gets the job. Best player gets the playing time. But if Jarrett Stidham's the best quarterback and he's not starting, you got a lot of guys in that locker room who will question that. And yes, I'm glad Sean Payton talked about that at the end of minicamp, because that really does matter. You and I have talked about this, and I think some people poo-poo it. You can't.
No.
Having a locker room that knows that the best player is going to win the job, that is absolutely essential. And it's one of the ways, frankly, in which Vance Joseph, as head coach back in 2017, started to lose the locker room by giving Isaiah McKenzie the punt returner job when he really hadn't earned it.
Yep. Because Vance had somebody telling him how to make the roster.
Yeah.
By the way, you had better watch Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking juice in the hood.
Oh,
Because
man.
that's one of my favorites. Message.
That's old school, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome to talk about these position battles. Our position previews for the offense will begin, but it's also awesome if our folks help us out on YouTube, Mace. How do they do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
and hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Would you please stay frosty?